All right, welcome back to Resilient Voices and Beyond. I'm so excited for today's episode. I believe this is episode 19 of season 2. So we're on the roll. Just kicking it along. But before I get started, I always got to give my thanks and gratitude to all the people that are supporting, all the people who are just sending encouraging words, all the people that I've interviewed before, had as guests. I just want to thank you all for being able to make this possible. I could not do what I'm doing here, by having this platform for many different reasons, but to be able to uplift, the foster care community and to inform more people around foster care and child welfare and in general. Without you guys' support. For those who don't know who I am and you just happen to stumble across this podcast, and my name is Michael D. Davis Thomas, aka MDDT Speaks. Yes, it is my initials. I spent 11 years in the Michigan child welfare system, 5 of those being in the juvenile system, the JJ system, 6 of those being in the foster care side of things. Went on to do a lot of work in advocacy, things from social work, from working corrections, working as a youth care worker, sitting on several boards, and so forth. In the child welfare arena, I've done a little bit over 10 years of work. I started advocating at age 15 in the foster care system and have been doing that nationally and locally ever since. So that's a little bit about me, but it's not about me this episode. So I'm going to streamline it to my guest because I could talk forever to introduce herself.
Hey, thanks for that. Yeah, so I'm Tamara, and I apparently am the special guest for today. Even though I consider myself just to be, regular old individual, I also have experience in child welfare and do some work with advocacy and consulting now. So that's just a little brief introduction of me, and I'll pass it back over.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, Tamara, what I like to do on Resilient Voices and Beyond is really kind of get a introduction of the person because a lot of times in this field we do a lot of panels, a lot of different things where we're talking and we're sharing on our expertise. But when building this platform, I've wanted to build something that helps people get to know the person behind the expertise so they can better understand when they see that person talking about their expertise or speaking on these things and sharing in a bigger light. So my first initial question is, where did this all begin for yourself?
Yeah, so I am 25, so a little bit older than a lot of the people who are still dabble in advocacy. But I'm about to be 26 in a couple months, so yay, birthday. And I guess my whole journey started, as a young child. I went into the foster care system at the age of 9. I lost a parent and had another parent who was a victim of addiction, so that kind of was the reasoning behind everything. And I like to preface that because I think one of the most important things about children being in foster care is that it's 95% of the time not their fault that they're there. So just want to preface that, but I was in foster care up until my 18th birthday when I chose to leave. And I did not get extra supports that were provided by my state, even though I could have, but at that point I was fed up. So that being said, I spent basically half of my childhood in child welfare in the foster care system, and I had a lot of different placements. We know that foster kids move homes many times, and that kind of fueled me to do the work that I do today. So that timeline after age 18 kind of looks like, I was dabbling with college, with different jobs, trying to find my path. At first I didn't think college was for me because I didn't have a lot of supports or self-discipline, so I kind of dropped out. Experienced working at Walmart and other, typical places, and I said, you know what, I think I'm meant for something more than this. I don't think I'm meant to be a cashier for the rest of my life, which is fine for those who enjoy that work. But for me, I wanted something more. And so when I went back to college, I decided I was going to do social work because I wanted to make a difference in other people's lives. And funny enough, when I went back throughout my entire undergrad, I kept saying, I will never work in foster care. I will never work in foster care. So it's funny enough to see where I am today. Apparently, a lot of the things I say I'll never do, I end up doing them, and they end up being like the best times of my life. So it's funny how that works out. But yeah, I went through undergrad. I graduated college in 2020 with my bachelor's in social work, and I'm currently a graduate student getting my master's in social work, and I graduate next semester. So yay for that. Um, but throughout undergrad, I actually joined a group, an advocacy group for foster alumni. And I was able to make changes to state policy and other things. I was able to speak up and tell my story. And I think that built a really strong platform for me. And it for the first time in my life, I felt heard. I felt like I had, power over decisions that were being made that affected people like me. And so I fell in love with the work, even though I said I would never work in foster care. I absolutely fell in love with advocating, and not just for myself, but for others who experienced it. And that kind of led me to where I am today. I aged off of that advocacy group because we have some limits on, how you can serve. And I started my own consulting business where I'm able to work with agencies or individuals and help build their platforms and help build their awareness of what it's like to be somebody in foster care.
Wow. And what a journey. What a journey. First and foremost, just navigating life. I wanna streamline a little bit back, if you don't mind me asking this question. Um, Throughout your journey, throughout your experience entering into the system, throughout your experience navigating that regular 9 to 5 life, just envisioning more, because if you're in this age group, we're the same age for now until you change, till you become 26 on me. Uh, um, where we all been there working, the regular 9 to 5, and we're just like, man, I want a career, I want something more than this, and not to knock working at Walmart, not to knock working at McDonald's and what have you. But I find it similar, for people who have lived experience, people who, or what have you, um, tend to look for legacy, and what they do, something to pass on or something to leave an imprint on. So what had throughout that time, throughout that experience, what was self-care like? What was your mental health like? And how did you manage that, throughout that time?
So I think mental health is a huge, huge topic when it comes to people in general. Everybody has mental health, and I don't mean mental health issues, but everybody needs to take care of their mental health, right? And we notice that it's prevalent. More issues and disorders are prevalent in individuals who are in foster care or who have aged out of foster care. And so I think it's fair to say that I share that experience with my peers who have similar experiences to me. Um, I didn't receive a lot of support in foster care, or obviously when you age out, you're kind of just thrown out into the world. So a lot of that support for my mental health was not there, and so because of that, I really struggled as a young adult, and I think that is why it kind of took me so long to get to where I am today, even though I am very proud of my achievements. Just struggling with mental health, I would struggle with things like motivation, and what should I do with my life, thinking I wasn't good enough, having those types of thoughts, going into depressions, dealing with anxiety over, different types of experiences that were not normal to me because I didn't have a typical upbringing. So new experiences I had as an adult that, people may have already had by the time they were 18 and dealing with those anxieties. So I struggled quite a bit with my mental health, and I still do to this day, if I'm being open and honest. But as an adult who has, become aware of my circumstances, I do seek the help that I need. And so I'm glad for that. I'm glad that I'm taking control of that situation. Um, but yeah, I would say, as somebody who was in foster care and aged out, the supports really weren't there for my mental health. I really had to, and I tell this all the time, but I really had to pick myself up from the bootstraps, and do it for myself because I knew that nobody was going to do it for me, sadly. And, that's something I'm passionate about as well, is talking about those supports for our young people. But the mental health journey is still a journey to this day, still ups and downs, but you learn to get through it.
Awesome, awesome. Definitely, I can concur. That it's an everlasting journey. But I ask that question because every time I ask it, I get a different response. Believe it or not, from different alumni and different people who are working in this field. And everyone takes their own unique approach to self care and to their own mental health. But we're living in a day and age where mental health is popping now. It's still having stigmas to it, but it's popping now. Everybody after COVID. Everybody's like, yeah, I need to get this together, but there was a time where it wasn't, and to some people who are still in care, they're still facing, I don't want to take it on. So I continuously ask that question to show that we all take care of mental health, and to help people feel a little bit more comfortable around it. I want to ask, what has been your biggest barrier exiting out of care, navigating adulting, that has been your biggest influence in life towards the work that you do?
Yeah, I think one of the main things, which I could talk about it all day, and it was absent for me, and I try to be this for other young people as I'm working for them, and I still seek this for myself, but that adult support, I'm an adult, I'm 25, but I still need an older adult to help me out sometimes, who has that experience, that life experience. And that was a really big struggle for me. So, like most individuals who have, one or two parents who are helping them out, and I don't mean financially, but in other situations, somebody to call to ask a question to, somewhere to go for the holidays, or somewhere to go if you had a problem like your apartment flooded. That was an issue for me in young adulthood. I have a dog, and my apartment flooded, and so we were both kind of like left to be in the car until that got taken care of, and we didn't have anywhere to go. So I think that older adult support is something that was missing for me, and it drives the work I do today, because as much as we can provide financial support and throw money at children in foster care or who have aged out of foster care, they really need that emotional connection, or just a support from an older adult. And that drives a lot of the work I do. I try to, like I said, be that for other people, young people who are coming through my path. If they have questions or if they need something, I try to do my best to help them meet that need. And that's really one of my biggest passions.
Definitely, definitely. I love that. I can say the same about myself. A lot of what I do is trying to be um that person that wasn't there for myself. Spent a lot of time in congregate care, So there was a lot of missing moments in my childhood. And I don't see how that, I feel like I was the luck of the draw, you know. And I don't know if other alumni who successfully, quote unquote, come out of the system with, a little bruises or what have you, also think this. But I know for myself, like I watch other peers of mine who have been given the same thing, or the same tool and what have you, but ultimately they went down different paths and aren't here today, or are here but struggling really hard, with drugs, with, alcohol, with relationships, and so forth. And you can go on with the list. And it's disheartening because for me, I used to rack my brain in that young age, as soon as I exit out, and I knew that was what their path was because I tried to stay connected with them. Um, what was the switch? What was the difference? For me, I was like determined to prove the system wrong. For them, I couldn't really find that pinpoint, factor of what navigated them to this or that. So as I continue to work on self and heal, and get to a place where I could be a help for someone else, um, I just what really stuck out to me was, okay, you probably won't ever have the answer of why someone chose this pathway, but what you can do is do your best to alleviate um, issues within the system, and flaws, and give someone the best foot forward. So when they exit out, and in that transition into adulthood, and in adulthood, they can have a sense of permanency that is stable and consistent. And I think that's what a lot of what we see people going through different factors when they exit out or when they're in care is because the lack of stability in care and the lack of consistency in care. And then they come out into adulthood and it's completely inconsistent or stable, So you find yourself trying to stand on solid ground when everything is like quicksand. So that's my little input ramble on. But I know you've done a lot of work in advocacy, and it's one thing that I want to pinpoint because it was something I was a part of. You had a conversation with other alumni, and I'm racking my brain trying to. I know on the name, it was called, but I believe it was something for school or it was a project that you were doing, or something like that. But I would love for you to share about that if you can.
Yeah, so with my consulting business, I was hosting some discussions and those are still ongoing, but I did hold a discussion with some alumni, and it was a few months ago, but we talked a lot about how we feel like our experience has an expiration date. So when I talked earlier about, I had to do this consulting business because the advocacy group I was a part of pretty much no longer took you after you were age 23. And that we see that a lot across the United States nationally, where, benefits or extra services stop at age 23 or even 26, if we're talking about maybe medical care, but most of those supports stop at 23. And we talked a lot about why does that occur? Because you still need that support from age 23 to 26. I mean, you never outgrow the need for support, even if it's not, $5,000 a year to help with school, even if it's something small like a crisis fund or something, because we didn't have that platform, when we were younger. And so we talked a lot about why does that exist, why it's important to us that we challenge that barrier, um, and also just talked about how, when you're sharing your story as somebody who was in foster care, nobody wants to hear it after a certain age. They're like, "Oh, you're 30. Yeah, you're good now." We want to hear it from somebody who's 22 or from somebody who's 16, and it's true that they're closer to, the experience of actually being in foster care, but your story never expires. Your story can always inspire someone else, no matter what age you are, because if you're 30 and you've already got, whatever you've got going on for your life. So like for me, I'm about to be 26 and I've got, I'm going to graduate with my master's degree. And that's inspiring for somebody who's in care or who is working for the system to hear okay, I was in care and these are my achievements now. This is what, I've been able to do. No matter what your age is, you don't have to be such a younger age. So that's what that conversation really entailed. And we hit on, like I said, details about why that occurs, why is that the mindset, and how we can challenge those barriers.
And I was on mute. But for me, I would think that um, a person with lived experience who went through a world of trauma, who made it out of that, you know, can only become an expert in their own life and in their own story and within their own field. So as they continue to progress the hereafter, that trauma, and begin to know how to live after that, um, it only is more helpful, I think, to the child welfare arena. Because when you're in your stage of 18 to 20, you just exit out. You're in the floodgates of trying to adult, and most times you don't do it the right way. So when you get to 21 to 25, you starting to pick up on how to navigate, you know. And then when you get past 25, now you're in a sense of full on adulthood. You're navigating a little bit better, but you still see those scars and those wounds show up, in relationships and family and what have you. But you're navigating and you're aware of those things. And I think about all those different stages of the after, being in child welfare, child care, correct myself, foster care, um, that can be helpful to the system, because we don't really understand why people do what they do, or why it's important, or why people actions lead to what have you. But we also know that people who have experienced foster care are more likely between the age that they exit to age 26 to experience some kind of homelessness. We also know that people who actually can experience some type of self-trafficking or human trafficking. We also know between the ages, someone exit to 26, 25, and therefore that they can experience some sense of substance abuse. So there's a lot of knowledge to be learned from older youth and their experiences, whether it be people who have, fought prey to those side effects of life, or people who were able to beat the odds and alleviate that pathway. Because either way, both sides have a story to tell and both sides have information to share, whether it be the person who unfortunately ended up getting hooked on substances, they have something to share there, or what led them to that. Or it can be the person who was able to avoid that pathway. What helped you avoid that, especially in those dark moments, in those times where situational depression was very prevalent, in those times when, COVID arrived and you didn't have a job, what helped you alleviate, being in that sunken place? So I think there's a conversation to be had between agencies, and so forth, about how to support people in the hereafter. But I also think that conversation will awaken a lot more conversations federally around supporting people in general. Because we have this false sense that when people make it to 18, that they're okay. But we don't recognize the full scope of the science behind trauma, and this is something I've said a couple times, but it's no secret that when someone experienced trauma or someone experienced a removal or something like that, they're set back in years, you know. But we also know that when the brain experiences trauma, it takes them back and they can be stunted in that trauma. Some people navigate forth, but Also, you have those, select few that unfortunately they can be at 18, but mentality and maturity is at 13, you know. And unfortunately, and that doesn't say anything different about the individual. I'm not saying that someone could be that way with a severe mental health deficit, because people can be with the mentality of a 13-year-old and be fully functioning in a job or in school. It's just that you've missed so many years of your life, and now you're at a place where you have some substance over your life. um, you tend to be childish. You tend to, fall prey to, like, well, I just want to splurge on my money, what have you. I know I did it. I know when they told me I was able to get $600 from extended foster care, I promise you, for the first while that I got that money was gone as soon as it reached my hand. And then I was like, I gotta stop doing this. I can't. But and I did it again and again because it was, impulse. I never got to indulge in my impulse brain as a child. So when I exited out the system, it was like a flood that my brain was like at a rush, and trying to comprehend life as being an adult, being responsible for myself, but also a rush of experiencing things that I couldn't experience because I was in lockdown facilities being told what to do. So that's my standpoint. I don't know if you have anything to share on that or want to add, but yeah.
Yeah, I have to really resonate with you there over the impulses. When I was young and I aged out of care, I actually was given access to a trust fund from, like, I don't know if this is a federal thing, but in Kentucky, if you have a parent who passes when you're a minor, they give you, supplemental income. And so where I was in foster care, all that income went into like one fund, because I wasn't allowed to have it, obviously, because I was in foster care and there wasn't a caretaker for me who was, a relative or whatever that could access the money because I had foster parents. So the money just sat in a fund accumulating, and I got access to that at 18. And that was quite a bit of money, enough to put a down payment on a house, I'll say that. And I blew through it in a year. And if you don't think you can spend that much money in a year, you can. I just, it was crazy. And still to this day I'm 25 years old, and I've gotten way better, obviously, at budgeting and things like that. And I am fortunate enough to where, I work a job that allows me to afford, my needs and also have money for my wants, but I do have to manage those impulses still to this day. It's not as bad. I will say, before, as soon as I had money, it was gone as well. So and even to this day, if I'm like expecting a bonus or something, I'm like, oh, what can I do with this money, rather than, oh, I should probably save the money. So it's a struggle to this day. And I think it's more than just financial impulses, but other things as well. If we're being quite honest, a lot of younger individuals, I would say between the ages of probably 14 to 18, or even 14 to 22, while they're, if we add the college range in there, they get to experiment with a lot of things. And so when you were in foster care, you didn't get to do that. And now you're doing it as an adult. And it just takes longer to realize, okay, this is something I don't want for my life. If we're talking about, like, a lot of high schoolers might go to parties, and there, let's be real, there's underage drinking. But it even happens in college campuses. Um, but as a young adult who aged out of foster care at 18, you're hitting that experience later. And so it takes longer for you to get your fill, if you will. And that, I think, plays a big role into leading to substance issues and things like that, coupled with all that trauma that hits you as an adult that you have to learn to deal with. And now you're experimenting with these things later, and that becomes your coping mechanism. So there's a lot that has to be talked about there. And I agree with you, a lot that can be learned from older individuals. And it would be very nice if the child welfare arena would be awoken to that.
Definitely, definitely. I jokingly tell people, because I started out on the juvenile side, when I was around that age, like I experienced all. I'm not trying to get locked up, you know. I've been there, done that, you know. But I watched a lot of people, you know, just go wild. Like, to say, for lack of better words, just go wild, you know. And they can be dangerous. It can be dangerous, you know. A lot of us in that stage, you know, of like just experimenting, just getting out there in life, find ourselves in dangerous relationships, dangerous situations. You know, a lot of the young ladies that I've done some mentoring with, you know, a lot of promiscuous behavior, you know, and it's really dangerous, you know. Um, and I would love to say, like, you know, these people in the state are, you know, receptive, but a lot of times they not trying to hear nothing. You know, they not trying to hear nothing, and it's heartbreaking, you know. But I've been on the sidelines watching a lot of the people that, you know, mentored. I'm like, you know, when you're ready and when you're done, I'm gonna be here, you know. Because at the end of the day, if they're not going to be receptive, you can't keep beating at that drum, you know. And I'm not there to judge, you know, but I'm there to help them pick it up, you know. Um, and eventually, you know, some of them, they do a toll on their life, and we building credit. We try we trying to find a job that will take them, all this other stuff. But unfortunately, that's what happens, you know. The system wasn't built or meant to be a parent, and that's what it's doing. And unfortunately, because something we're trying to supplement parenthood as a system, these are the results that we get, you know. So, and that's a conversation to be had. Another thing, a very deep conversation. But one of the other things that, you know, arose in our conversation was equity, and lived experience individuals, you know. I don't know if you want to share a little bit on this, you know, and your thoughts. But throughout my time, you know, advocating, you know, doing different things, there's been, you know, we, you know, going through the whole navigation of tokenism, you know, we all know it, you know, and what have you. But also getting into that place where you become a professional. Say, for instance, you create your own consulting business, or you create your own social work, you know. Why am I drawing a blank? Therapy office, or what have you. Being a person, you know, living in your own right of lived experience, and then asking for equity, you know. It seems to come off, you know, or seems to be shameful, you know, for us to ask that. In your experience, what has been your experience, and what are your thoughts on this topic?
There is a lot to be said, I feel. And I think in my personal experience, I've been advocating for years. I was 19 when I started, and someone offered me, this is how I started. So it was very like non-formal, but someone offered me to come speak to a couple of youth groups at a church about my experience in foster care. I will be honest, they didn't tell me the reason for it. They were not like, yeah, this is what they're going to get from it. But I was like, I'll get paid, so I'm going to do it. And that's when I really started sharing my story, and I loved it. And so then, you know, a year or two later, when I was offered a formal position where I was actively advocating and working with my state and national agencies on child welfare issues, you know, it became really, really prevalent very quickly that, you know, they're very quick to invite you to be there but not really listen to what you're saying, right? And that's what we're calling as tokenism. And it's when they are basically using you as an image that looks good for them, but they're not really hearing what you're saying or trying to implement, you know, your goals or what you're saying are needs of children in care. Um, and I think it's really tough. One, where a lot of us are so young when we start, and a lot of our professionals, let's be real, they're very old. The system really needs an update, okay? Not just with its workers, but with its mindset. And it's tough when you're working with people who have been in their field for 20 to 25 years. They're now maybe 40 to 45 years old. or older, and they're looking at somebody who's 16 to 23 who's talking very realistically about topics and issues in child welfare. It's very hard for them to grasp the concept that those individuals might know more than they do. And so I think that's a big issue that plays into the tokenism. And I think that has to do with like I'm drawing a blank on the word, but when someone's like really proud of whatever, like their ego, it has to do with ego. And willing to put that aside to really hear individuals who are the experts on what they've been through. And so, like I said, I've experienced this multiple times, and it does suck when you have to remind people constantly, hey, like this was my experience. So, what I'm telling you is real. What I'm telling you is correct. And there's something to be done about it. And here are the ways from, my experience and my expertise that I think would be best for young people. And it's really disheartening to have to remind people over and over again that you're the expert on your experience, and that you're not saying that you know more than them, but you would like to partner with them and their knowledge, so you can work together, because that's really what it's supposed to be about, is working together. But unfortunately, we run into it a lot of times where we're not heard and we're just a face at the table. And so, I like to encourage a lot of young people to never be afraid to speak up. Do not be afraid of retaliation from these systems, because you're already done. You're done. What else are they going to do? Okay, they've done enough. You're done with them. Give them your best, okay? And let them know what needs to be done, and don't be afraid to speak up for yourself. That's all. That's what advocacy is all about. But I constantly am an advocate for, you know, tearing down that wall of tokenism, because I supervise an advocacy group right now. The one I worked for, I'm now the supervisor of, so full circle. But I work with a lot of young people who have aged out, who are now advocates, and they experience that, and it really hurts me to see that still going on. So I'm constantly advocating for them when I see that happening.
Definitely, definitely. I couldn't have said that any better. I would add, in my experience, I've been on both sides of the fence, advocating on juvenile justice and then advocating in foster care, and throughout both times, experience in my earliest experience, it was what I got out of it was a healing experience. It was healing for me to share my story. But then to come back and the article is published, the video is published, and it's only snippets of the most horrible parts, not of my triumph, not of my overcoming, and it's not sharing my story from a strength place, a strength point of view. And most of us know, in the steps of recovery and, sharing your story strategically, you should always share your story from a place of strength. So when it's taken and it's shown in this very weak place, it's very triggering. And that can put a person so much further back in their healing, and I watched that in my earlier age as I was advocating be repeatedly done. But I will admit, like I felt as though um there was no real ownership for me to step up and say anything, you know. Um and as I grew and as I became my own advocate, I've learned, and I said this in our conversation, I've learned to bring my own chair, to stand on my own ground, and to nudge my way into the table, because it's my life, and it's the lives of other people who have experienced that. Most of the people around the table, most of the people in the seats already have never experienced, so if we're going to vote, if we're going to talk about getting funds, if we're going to be fundraising to, support these individuals or what have you, you can't do it without the people who are enduring or who have endured. And they have every right, to navigate how their story is shared, They have every right to ask for payment for their story, and they have every right to say no. I don't really stand with what you guys are going for. I would like you guys to remove my name and my property, my story out of what you're doing. You know, and we have to be okay with that. Um, and a lot of people feel entitled. A lot of agencies feel entitled. A lot of businesses feel entitled because child welfare became a business somehow. Like somehow it has became a business, and it is crazy because in the title of it all, it's about the kids. It's about the kids, and we have turned this aspect of welfare into an industry, and not just a couple 100,000, not just a couple million, $1 billion industry, you know. And a lot of our policies and a lot of our legislation stand on the grounds of some of these big businesses that reap the benefit out of these. So when we talk about, and this is kind of going a little bit far left from this conversation, but when we talk about transformative change, we have to think. So in order to have transformative change, that means some of these businesses are going to go out of business. Because if we want to alleviate congregate care, which there's been some talk about that with the away from home with Think of Us, alleviating congregate care and making going towards more preservation of families and prevention, and going towards more foster homes and all this aspect of having nurturing environments, because congregate care are more so like prisons nowadays than therapeutic environments for healing. What does it truly mean to alleviate those places? Because they're flourishing and they're making a lot of money, so what does that look like? Because we don't talk about the side of child welfare that looks like the same thing as the oil industry, in a political aspect. If you have these people and they want to chalk up the money of gas or chalk up this, that means that they have to talk to the people who are giving the oil. But that's my little thinking process. I'm not going to continue to ramble on, but that's something I wanted to share with you all, because I think it's important to really think about that and reflect that, we are losing sight of the real work and what we're doing everything for, in the aspect of child welfare, the aspect of social services, the aspect of human services. And it's a very unhealthy way to approach. And I think the more we talk about things, the more we highlight them for what they are, we can first recognize and accept it and own it and create that change. But, you know, switching back gears, I want to ask, I only have a couple last questions for you. I appreciate your time with me and I'm talking. But I know you have started your own advocacy, consulting business and so forth. I know that you have a lot of goals, a lot of things. You're in your master's degree program, you get ready to graduate. What is next for you on this journey and the work that you're doing?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. And again, I also appreciate, the time and space to sit here and discuss some of these issues that we don't always have the space to talk about in our work or day-to-day business. But yeah, I think for me, one of my biggest goals is obviously I'm going to graduate. There's no ifs, ands, buts. I got to do it. But I'd like to continue working in the policy arena, just not just child welfare, but for people in general. We were talking about we have to learn to care for people, all people. And so I really want to, I feel like policy is a top-down approach. And some people don't like that, but I do. And it affects a lot of people at once. It affects many communities at once. And so if there's any way I can alleviate troubles or make individual situations better by by influencing those, I definitely will do my best. And so for me, it's like I'm being a vessel for our vulnerable communities or for our people in this country, and I'll say in this state for now, but in this country, maybe eventually. So continuing to work in policy, and I would absolutely love to, have a seat in our Senate or in our House or something like that where I'm actively able to vote for that change. And so, yeah, that's kind of what's next for me on the horizon. And my consulting business will take me as far as it goes. I really love sharing my story. I love inspiring others and empowering them. So I do keynote speakings through that. I do conference workshops and other things. And I will give you a tidbit of what's coming next for my business that I haven't shared publicly, but now people will hear it when they listen to this. But I am coming out with a Be Your Own Mentor package. And it's going to be it can really be for anyone, but it's really targeted at young adults who are lacking support, not just in foster care, but in general, whatever their circumstances may be. And it's going to cover topics like, self-discipline and task management, mental health and physical wellness, things like that, just things that you don't get when you don't have that support system around you as a young adult. So I believe it's going to have about 10 modules of different topics and things. And I'm going to be releasing that hopefully in 2023 for young adults who want to tap into that. So, yeah.
And I'm muted again. That's awesome. I'm just, in awe and truly honored to be able to uplift and have this conversation with you. Know you've been doing, this advocacy and, navigating life as long as I have, you know. So it's truly awesome to be able to hear your story, to hear your journey and to see someone else in the fight and just, trying to make change any way that they can, so thank you for sharing this space with me. um is there any advice you would like to leave here today?
Honestly, I just think in general, for young people in care or for communities of people as a whole, just knowing that there's a few things I think that I'll share. One, knowing that, you know, you're in control of your own life, and what happens well, I'll say mostly you're mostly in control because obviously we know there's circumstances that happen that we can't control, but I never want people to give up because they do have that control. So if you're giving up or if you feel like giving up, look at the reasons why and maybe try to address those, because I know, and you can speak to this too, that like we've had that feeling of giving up, and we've pushed through that and look at where we are today, from not giving up. So I never want anybody to give up on anything. So never give up, obviously, would be my first one, which is pretty general. Um, Another one, which actually I had a foster parent tell me this while I was in foster care, and I think it really has driven me to do a lot of things, and it has stuck with me. But it's not really a quote, but it's just something he told me, and he told me, opportunity doesn't knock often, so take them when you get them. And so because of that, I have taken so many opportunities, and obviously look where I am. I've been able to have lots of different, great things happen because I didn't turn down even the small opportunities. Now, obviously, we know there's capacity. If you're not able to do something, say no. It's okay to say no, but don't turn down those opportunities that might be good for you. Don't be scared to say yes, because opportunity isn't always there. And so definitely take those when you can. And then my last one, I would leave for the community of people who surround young people in care or just children in general. But there was a quote given at a conference that I was at that is actually on the back of my business cards now because it just really, really resonates with me. And the quote says, "A child who is not embraced by the village will burn it down to feel its warmth." And so I think that's really important when we're talking about raising the future generation, those in foster care or not in foster care. You have to be there for these young people, or else we don't know what avenue they're going to go down when they are young adults and trying to navigate life. So please, please resonate with that quote as well and be there for them in any way that you can, even if it's just a phone call or a text or a check-in or whatever it may be. We're not asking much, but it takes a village. And so try to be a part of that.
Definitely, definitely. I couldn't have said it any better. Um, any last comments, and this is more so as a space for you to drop any album, any book, any EP you got coming out, or how people can follow you.
Yeah, people can definitely check out my social media on Facebook. It's TV, so that's like literally a TV that you watch. People get very confused, but yes, that's my initials as well. I actually came up with the name because it rhymed, so I was like TV advocacy. So like I don't know, but that's what it is, and that's what I'm gonna stick with. So you can find me on Facebook, TV advocacy, or on Instagram, TV advocacy. We're not on Twitter yet, but we will be soon. And you can also go to my website at tvadvocacy.com and look at, services that I'm offering or just read a little bit more about me. And then another little drop here that not a lot of individuals know about, but there will be a book release in 2023 as well. It's called Letters to the Village. And it's all about, my village of people that I had from childhood until young adulthood, and the rights and the wrongs that were in that village. And it's a very honest and open book. So it may be a little bit of a hard read for some individuals who aren't, as privy to some of the downs in life that individuals have in foster care. But yeah, be prepared when you read that book is what I will say, and be on the lookout. So yeah.
That's awesome. It's truly been an honor to have you on today. I appreciate it. I know we've been in the workings to get you on here, and talking, and truly love the work that you're doing, and I'm excited to see the work that you're getting ready to put out the next year. Um, first and foremost, I want to acknowledge that, on this episode, something could have been said that was triggering, to you, so I truly acknowledge self-care and mental health. So, before you do anything, take a moment to get yourself back grounded, and do some mindfulness exercises. If still feel, a little bit triggered, I do. And implore you guys to seek resources, seek help and stuff like that. Don't just sit in those things by yourself. I am here. My contact information should be somewhere around where you're listening to this podcast. You can feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions or what have you surrounding anything that may have came up. I'll be happy to help someone navigate that pathway to mental health support. But I want to acknowledge that something here could be potentially triggering, and to make sure that before you step into that job, if you're listening to this on your way to work, before you step back into the house, or if you're in the house, before you do anything else, just get yourself back grounded. Take some time to do some breathers or what have you. And then also, it's definitely, it's getting colder out if you live in the area where you get all seasons. So make sure that you're taking care of yourself. COVID is still out here, cold and flu season is still out here, and what have you. So just do what you can to take care of yourself. Bring those masks back out if you have to. Get that hand sanitizer going, and what have you. Just do what you can. We talked about villages, and I'm a firm believer that we all are part of one big village. By you taking care of yourself, you're taking care of so many other people. So just take your time to think about the other people that are surrounding you in this season, of sickness and what have you, and just be mindful of your neighbor and what have you. So with that being said, a lot is happening, a lot is going on. You guys know I've mentioned it before. I'll be ending this season at the end of December. What that would look like for me is taking Resilient Voices and Beyond and starting up that movement and that initiative into the communities, into the world, getting in front of people and legislators and policymakers to really create a difference. I'll be taking a break from the podcast a little bit to let everybody catch up because season 1 was 51 episodes. I don't know how many episodes I'm gonna end here, but I want people to catch up so we can, when I come back, we can have conversations about some of the topics that were brought up, and see what you guys think, because the whole idea of this is to provoke conversation and to inform, but also for the people that are on here, sometimes it can be healing. I have a range of different people that come on here. And I do that purposefully to show the different ranges of what thriving look like, from people being community leaders to stakeholders to people with lived experience, showing the different levels of thriving in each and every one of those individuals, and I think we don't do enough to do that. So my platform is here to showcase that, that success isn't linear, thriving isn't linear, and everyone does it in their own unique way. With that being said, look out for, my coffees and conversations. Look out for the next episode coming out. And I hope that you guys have a good night, good morning, good whenever you're listening to this. This has been Resilient Voices and Beyond. Thank you. Talk to you guys soon.